Let's talk about Saquon for a moment. Yesterday on local Philadelphia radio, our Jason Kelsey, who knows that offense as well as it can be known, brought up how the Eagles' explosive addition on offense has impacted the conversations around the quarterback this year.
I think Jalen never gets enough credit for a lot of the things he does for this offense. And Saquon Barkley would not have the season he had without having Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. And that's a reality of it. And he never gets credit for that. And a little bit, but all of that goes to the offensive line and Saquon. Mm-hmm. The reality is his threat as a runner, his threat as an RPO person, all of that stuff opens up so many other things.
So that's really interesting. And again, that's about as credible a person to be saying that as you possibly can get. So is this linebacker sitting here. Is that right? Is Jalen Hurts' ability to run a significant factor in the season that Saquon Barkley has had?
Yeah, I would say it's right up there with the offensive line, how massive they are in the play design and Saquon's greatness. But, we see it in Baltimore as well with Lamar Jackson. When you have a quarterback that's a threat to keep the ball, it holds the backside defensive end and the backside linebacker. It forces offenses to play 11 on 11. And when you have those two paying attention to Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley is one-on-one, we've seen he has more yards in the NFL than anybody without even getting touched. I think something like 1,500 yards. So when you look at the key of the Super Bowl is going to be, can he do something with his arms? But right now, it's because the running game is so effective because of that threat.
But, Greeny, the reality is this. In the playoffs, Jalen Hurts is averaging roughly about 8 rushing yards attempts per game. So to me, he's really playing better, throwing for the pocket, to his credit, especially against Washington. So during the regular season, I agree with what Jason Kelsey said, but that has not been the trend in the playoffs.
Yeah, but remember, he's come in the playoffs coming back from the concussion, and then he had the knee. So we will see. Graziano, help me figure something out here.
I'll try.
I cannot decide if Jalen Hurts, because look at the question on the screen.
Yeah.
We don't usually ask that about a guy who has been the starting quarterback in the Super Bowl twice in a 3-year span. Mm-hmm. Is Jalen Hurts underappreciated? Is he overly criticized? I feel like there's a sentiment out there that he is, and I'm not sure I agree.
The problem is, in the times in which we live, there's a sentiment out there that says everything, right? Like you can find a conversation happening online that says Jalen Hurts stinks, and you can find a conversation happening online that says Jalen Hurts is the greatest quarterback of all time. It's a matter of what you want to pay attention to. I think what is accurate about Jalen Hurts this season is that, yes, he's still the quarterback that can elevate his team, and he can have a game as a passer like he did in the NFC Championship game and deliver in a big moment. But week to week, he did not perform like that consistently this year. There were stretches where the passing game lagged. There were stretches where members of the passing game criticized it for not being consistent enough.
Right.
So I think you can say that Jalen Hurts did not perform with consistent accuracy and production throughout the year, week to week, without saying Jalen Hurts stinks or Jalen Hurts doesn't get enough credit. Yeah. I do think we know who he is and that he's a guy that can step up in big moments and can do anything you want to do. It's just, I think this year was not quite as consistently great as, say, 2022 was.
Greeny, here's the juxtaposition. There's a lot of people out there that say wins is not a quarterback statistic. All Jalen Hurts does is win. Super Bowl in 2 of the last 3 years. To Graz's point, though, here's where I think you're getting the criticism. During the season, they only averaged 187 yards per game passing the ball, which is 29th in the league. And when we're talking about the fireworks of the Josh Allens, Lamars, and obviously the Mahomes, that's nowhere near where their production is. But I go back to what Jason Kelsey said, and again, working with Rex Ryan and how much he hated defending the quarterback runs, he does deserve credit because some of his impact is hard to quantify, and I think that's why there's sort of like this dichotomy about Jalen Hurts. It just looks different than others, but it's still effective.
It's because we can't measure it, Greeny, right?
Right.
We can't measure really his impact because it's not a statistic that backs it up, because Saquon's statistic is his statistic, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But the reality is his impact, and we give Josh Allen a lot of credit for what he don't do. That's putting the ball at risk. Jalen Hurts had a season a couple years ago, last season, where he continuously turned over the ball.
Yeah.
Right. So now him managing the game, we actually hold it against him. And the reason we hold it against him is because he makes $255 million. When you make that type of money, people want to be entertained every night. They want to see you perform at an MVP caliber level, but they don't need that for them to be effective and be able to win.
The other thing is this Eagles. We talk about the Saquon Barkley and the offensive line. Like it all works together so well. It's such a great team in terms of how it's built and the number of different ways you can win. Like Patrick Mahomes will have a playoff stretch where he doesn't get to 200 yards passing. They win all the games. He gets benefit of the doubt because we've seen him hold up the Lombardi Trophy 3 times, right? We haven't seen that with Jalen yet. So, but I mean, you talk about, there's not stats to back it up. He would say, well, we've been in the Super Bowl the last 2 out of the last 3 years.
Right.
So that's a stat. I must be doing something right.
But he's the last
right?
person we give the credit. We're going to give it to Vic Fangio. We're going to give it to Kellen Moore. We're going to give it to Saquon Barkley. We're going to give it to the offensive line. Then we credit Jalen
I'll
Hurts.
venture to say that if they win this game, he's not going to care who gets the credit.
Right. No, absolutely.
And Greedy, if you go back to the roots of who he is, his dad was a high school coach.
Yeah.
He went to Alabama. He actually got benched. He was a second-round pick, not a first-round pick. So he's been a little bit of the underdog his whole career. But again, his selflessness to me is critical. And when you hear a former teammate like Jason Kelsey, talk about his impact to me, that's the underrated aspect of his game.
See, I guess the way I look at it is, and maybe the quarterback, he doesn't feel like as he's getting the glory, but
Right.
every team in the NFL would win the way the Eagles win if they could. There's nothing you can do more effective. The NFL in this day and age is about explosive plays on offense. That's the line you should underline. Not how many yards did you throw for. It's how many explosive plays does a team have. If you can get explosive plays in the running game, that's better than getting them in the passing game because there's almost no risk attached to it. So like they're doing what they're doing because they can, and everyone would do it if they could.
Yeah.
And so people look at it and they say, well, you got A.J. Brown, you got Devontae Smith. Why isn't he throwing for 350 yards a game? The simple answer is that he doesn't have to, and it's better not to. We'll have more on this win. Let's talk about Hurts a minute here, because to me, he's become a fascinating figure. Is he overrated? Is he underrated? I've heard both of those arguments. So yesterday on local Philadelphia radio, our Jason Kelsey brought up the Eagles' explosive plays, Saquon Barkley, the addition that he has been, and how the quarterback has impacted that.
I think Jalen never gets enough credit for a lot of the things he does for this offense. And Saquon Barkley would not have the season he had without having Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. And that's the reality of it. And he never gets credit for that. And a little bit, but all of that goes to the offensive line and Saquon. The reality is his threat as a runner, his threat as an RPO person, all of that stuff opens up so many other things.
Okay, so there's Jason Kelsey. Who would know better than him? Maybe a linebacker. So let's ask that question. Saquon Barkley just had what might very well be the greatest season any running back has ever had in the history of the NFL. That's right there with the best of them. Does the quarterback deserve credit for that?
Absolutely. We first saw this when Michael Vick's team continuously always led the league in rushing because it's such a threat to keep the football that it holds the backside defensive end, the backside linebacker, creates these horizontal seams for Saquon to pick his holes through. And then now when he does this as well, it's like this is virtually unstoppable because it makes it 11 on 11. And if one guy is out of his gap, one guy misses a tackle, it's a touchdown, right? So Saquon Barkley would not have we've seen an example of it, right? We saw him we didn't see this Saquon in New York. Right. We see the effect as well with Lamar Jackson and what happened with Derrick Henry. He had a year where he looks like he's Benjamin Button aging backwards. That's because of the evolution of the quarterback. You see that with Jaden Daniels. It's a very few quarterbacks that can do that can add to the run game because they're a legitimate threat to pull it.
It's interesting you say that. You just on the thing with the Giants never had an offensive line that resembled this at all.
Right.
There was the one year where they had that really good year that they went to the playoffs and won a game. Remember, Daniel Jones was running the ball like crazy that year. Maybe not as well as Jalen Hurts does, but really effectively.
700 yards.
And look how well it worked.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, look, the Lamar Jackson Ravens teams almost always led the league in rushing, right? Like by wide margins a lot of the years. And there's no question about it. When you watch like the Ravens playoff games this year and you're watching Derrick Henry tear through the middle of the defense, you're also seeing the linebackers kind of drift over toward Lamar, who doesn't have the ball anymore.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a lot to be. Look, this Eagles team is extremely well assembled, right? Saquon Barkley is a perfect fit with this quarterback and this offensive line. And these receivers, by the way, who like to block, or at least are willing to block. I don't know if they like it, but they do it, right? So it's really well assembled. So you can't really give outsized credit to one member of the offense because it all functions together so well.
But, Greedy, we talked about this. Ask any defensive coach, they hate 11-man spacing where they have to defend the run of the quarterback. And you mentioned it earlier, Saquon has 50 explosive plays The difference is you're playing 11-man spacing, and he can hit a home run. So it's the perfect combination of you have to pay enough attention to Jalen Hurts, and as soon as you're one gap off, he can take it to the house.
And what happens to a linebacker when he puts the ball in the belly, it forces you to pause, so it sets up the blocks for the linemen who are climbing up on you because you're looking at what's going on in the backfield, and now somebody has an angle, you're getting ear hold in the back of the head.
That touchdown run we keep showing, you watch Saquon Barkley delivering the key block as Jalen Hurts is running to the left. Like he doesn't commit until that happens. So it's just fun. Saquon is helping as much as he's being helped. This is not what I was talking about.
No, but this
25
play,
yards, like he had one touch for 20 yards.
Washington Commanders run defense there, that was not. But yeah, I'm talking about the Jalen Hurts touchdown.
that started the other video, but this one is good too. That play, the one we just showed, the 60-yard touchdown. Like if you tell me if you had the same experience I did watching the game.
Oh yeah.
The Commanders get it.
Yeah.
They go. It takes them like 8 minutes.
Yep.
They go down the field. They kick a field goal, and I'm thinking, wow, this is going to be a game. And then first play, Barkley, 60-yard touchdown. I thought, no, it's not.
Gritty, you would have got six.
Tackle, and I literally said, "Uh-oh."
Gritty would have got 6 on this one. I'm confident.
I don't know. Somebody.
Look, but let's go back to the original question.
Yeah.
Because you just said, Dan, I think the most impactful part of this. Yeah, the tackling there is embarrassing, but
It's not great.
But let's deal in the most important part of this, because you just said it's so well assembled, you can't give credit to any one person. What Jason Kelsey is saying is there's one person who's not getting credit for it that should be. Everyone talks about the line because they're 1,700 pounds.
Right.
And obviously everyone talks about Saquon because that's what we can all see. And no one, when we analyze / grade the quarterback and we say, well, he's only throwing for 180 yards, we don't put that on his ledger.
Yeah, and the problem is he did have some bad games this year. He wasn't consistent week to week as a passer. The way he might have been 2 years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. So, he opened himself up to some criticism that was external and also some that was internal. Remember the A.J. Brown passing and the Chickies and Pete's with Brandon Graham? That was a whole week of that. And then they came back and said, with a big passing game, said, I told you so. And you're like, wait a minute, you told yourself so. Anyway, the point is, he has opened himself up to it by not having the kind of consistently excellent year that we saw from him a couple of years ago. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But that's why this is out there.
Agree, and that shows up statistically. They only average 197 yards passing per game, which is 29th. And with everything else going on in the league, with all the fireworks we're seeing, I think that's where some of the criticism comes from. But if Jalen Hurts was sitting right here, he would say, judge me by us winning.
Right.
And that goes all the way back to high school, what he dealt with at Alabama. And at the end of the day, hard stop. He's in the Super Bowl 2 of the last 3 years.
But the issue is he has to win the big game where he may have to step out of his comfort zone. All he has to make is 1 and 2 defining plays, and it changes the entire trajectory and how we feel about Jalen Hurts. If he wins a title and he beats Patrick Mahomes, just like we talk about Eli, is he a first ballot Hall of Famer? Is he not? He beat Tom Brady. Okay, he's
twice.
Right,
He's in. That's right. And look, he's young, and he will have an entire portion of his career that doesn't include Saquon Barkley. The running backs just don't play as long as quarterbacks do. So he'll get that chance. The reality is here was the Eagles season. And I think we all will agree they did this right. They played their first 4 games of the year. Jalen Hurts had 7 turnovers in those 4 games. They were 2-2. They had a bye. They all got together and they said, our defense is so good. And from that point forward, they were. We've got Barkley, and we can run the heck out of the ball. Whatever happens, let's just stop turning it over. And from that point forward, he only had 3 turnovers and 0 in the playoffs. So what does that mean? It means playing more conservatively, playing more cautiously, not putting the ball in harm's way, counting on your defense when you need to, and getting the explosive plays with Barkley. It makes sense.
Their opponent next Sunday is the ultimate example of a team that understands immediately what it has and what it doesn't have, what kind of game it's in versus what kind of game it was in last week, and what it needs to do to take advantage of its advantages and win that particular game. The Eagles are built to do it. We'll see if they can do it.
All right, let's do more, because we've had this conversation twice today. Graziano doesn't like it when we say that Hurts outplayed Mahomes.
Because he didn't.
So that's one take. But I want to get to something different. Because we led both hours today with this sound from Jason Kelsey, basically saying Jalen Hurts doesn't get enough credit for what we did offensively this year because his presence is a huge factor in the success of the running game. And most fans, Chris, look, you played it for years, including myself. We see where the ball goes. We see them running the ball so effectively. We were like, oh, Saquon's awesome. Offensive line is awesome. Does Jalen Hurts not get enough credit for the season this team had and where they are right now?
Oh, I think he deserves a tremendous amount of credit, and he's understated, underrated because the team doesn't throw the ball a lot. They were dead last in pass attempts this year, but the threat of being able to throw the ball over your head is just enough to create a lot of room for Saquon Barkley and that offensive line to get going. See, when you have A.J. Brown and you have Devontae Smith out there and you know that Jalen Hurts has been great at being able to throw the ball downfield, that changes the way that you have to call defenses. That changes the way that you have to line up. You throw into the mix Jalen Hurts' ability as a runner and having to account for the zone read, all of a sudden you're talking about seams that open up for Saquon Barkley that otherwise wouldn't be there. Saquon Barkley rushed for over 2,000 yards in the regular season. 1,500 yards came before contact.
Right.
So that's the room that Jalen Hurts and the threat as a runner, as a passer, helps create for that offense to continue to get going.
I think the criticism of Jalen Hurts, what it is the fact that when he did have to throw the ball, he would eat the ball and take sacks that he didn't need to take because it was guys that was open, but he didn't want to risk it. So he was so risk averse. We used to hear this about Alex Smith all the time, not kind of taking the risk down the field when you have a number one receiver, a guy that we think could be top 5 receiver in this league. You give him a chance to win those one-on-one matchups. So I think the criticism is we see him take unnecessary sacks at times.
But Bart, if we watched the game last week against Washington, it was very clear that Washington was trying to do the same thing, right? Take away Saquon. They thought maybe could Lattimore hold up against A.J. Brown. Obviously he couldn't. But to Jalen Hurts' credit, he made some big-time throws when he needed to. And look, the score got away at the end. But when it was a close game, Jalen Hurts was a big reason why they won that game.
If that's what Washington looked like trying to take away Saquon, I think that's what they looked like.
He ran for 60 yards and a touchdown on the first offensive play.
I think they were trying.
How's it going, everybody? Villa Sports Network here. Just want to thank you guys for your support on the channel. Thank you guys for watching the video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Also want to kind of remind you to don't forget to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment on the video if you like as well. But regardless of the fact, thank you again for your support, and hope to see you on the next video.